this week. Brittany, not many people can come on a Shabbat morning and be asked, can you lead Torah service? And then spontaneously agree and say yes. So I really appreciate you doing that for us. Shabbat Shalom. I went to my very first protest yesterday. It's about time. I'm 36. Now, before I get into it, I do want to say that I posted on my Facebook page earlier in the week that I was going, and about 5 minutes later, I got a call from Alan Hoffman, our president, who said that he was receiving some calls. And I want to say that while I'll speak a little bit about the protest this morning, I understand that we hold different political and philosophical beliefs in the congregation, and I will be speaking about it as an example of rolling the rock off of the well and drawing from the water and finding our source of making the world a better place. But I won't be speaking about it in an effort to tell you that it's the right thing to do. I think everyone needs to find their own corner of the world that they wish to repair. I will also add that the congregants that expressed some concern both came to me, and we've engaged in a very nice, open dialogue, and we're listening to each other's thoughts on the matter, and that gives me a great deal of pride in our community. And that several congregants came with me to the protest, and they lived out their Jewish values through doing that. They prayed with their feet, as Heschel liked to say, and that gave me a great source of joy as well. The protest was at Walmart, and it was over the issue of a living wage. A living wage means that when you put in an honest day's work, you receive a paycheck that covers your basic necessities: housing, food, medicine, saving a little bit for the future. And we got there, and there were a number of different kinds of people there. Some were clergy, or they brought members of their congregation. Some were labor organizers. And the bravest of all were Walmart employees, and they were on strike on Black Friday. And I was standing next to a young woman. She was black, and she was holding her son in her arms, a baby. And I asked her, "Do you work here?" And she said, "I do." I said, "Are you on strike?" She said, "Yes, I am." And we were standing on the sidewalk off of Walmart property, but early in the protest, those workers that were on strike were called forward to move into the parking lot. And instantly, the Grand Prairie Police in their SUVs zoomed up to the employees that were on strike, and the management came from the inside to the outside. You know, they didn't need to zoom up, by the way. They could have parked their vehicles and walked out peacefully and quietly. And I was too far away to hear the dialogue, but eventually the workers came back onto the public grounds, and we proceeded to chant protest chants. And I felt so small, because my act of bravery of putting on my Facebook page, my personal page, not the shul page, what I felt was important to me and living out my Jewish values, paled in comparison to this young woman standing there with her baby in her arms. I have a contract, and what happened to me when I ruffled some feathers was an open discourse. I don't know what's going to happen to her, and I don't know if she knew either when she decided to step across the line yesterday morning. The world is on fire. There are young men who cannot find employment or purpose around the world, and the Islamic State is happy to take them in. We've seen 10 of the hottest summers on record since the year 2000 because we're not taking good care of our planet. Ebola has killed thousands of people in Africa. In our own United States government, our healthcare reforms and our immigration reforms are barely scratching the surface of addressing the needs of humanity or the U.S. economy. There's plenty of work to do. So why is it that we find it so difficult to act? Well, if any of you have had the pleasure of moving, you'll know that the name of the game is to take a box and you put it on the floor, and you pull the things off the shelf and you put it in the box until it's full. Then you seal up the box and you need to push the box across the floor so it's neatly stacked next to the other boxes waiting for the moving truck. And when you first go and push the box, it doesn't move. But eventually, you push hard enough and you get this little lurch, and then it slides along into its place where it's supposed to go. Physicists describe that lurch and then that slide as overcoming a force called static friction. That means that there's tension between the box and the floor even while it's standing still. That's why it won't spontaneously slide across the floor into its place on its own. And in this week's Parsha, we encounter Jacob experiencing enough force in his soul that he overcomes a spiritual static friction. He's running away from his brother Esau. He's stolen Esau's blessing. And he is told he should go to his ancestral home, and he comes to a well. And there are 3 shepherds lounging around the well, and they can't roll the rock off the well to water their flocks because it's too heavy. And then Jacob sees Rachel, and he's struck with inspiration, and he does the work of 3 or 4 men, and he shoves the rock off the well, and he waters her flocks. It's an amazing story. And we could read it on its surface level that a very strong, healthy young man is very excited to see a pretty girl, and he's showing off. But the Midrash invites us to read the story on a deeper level, which is to say that the well is a symbol of Torah. And when we drink deeply from the well, we imbibe all of the values and morals that our tradition teaches us. But what sits on top of the well, that heavy stone, is our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination. And it's heavy, and it's hard to move it off the well so we can take a deep drink of Torah and make the world a better place. So how do we move the rock off the well? What keeps us from doing it? I will tell you that I had 3 different chairs of committees in my office this past week, and they spoke of feeling alone. And they said, I feel like I'm failing in the mission of my committee and the nice things and the good things that I'm trying to do for the community. I don't feel like I'm being effective. I feel like I'm alone. I can't move the rock. I can't get enough momentum. It reminded me of a folk tale. A father and son are on a journey, and in the road they suddenly find a boulder. So the father says to the son, could you move the boulder, please? And the son pushes on it, he pulls on it, he finds a sturdy branch and he tries to use it as a lever to pry it off the road. In desperation, he reaches into his satchel and he pulls out a tool and he starts chipping away at it fleck by fleck, but he can't move the boulder. And he turns back to his father with tears in his eyes and he says, I tried, I can't get it to budge. And his father asks him, did I ever tell you you needed to move the boulder alone? So together, they push against the boulder and they're able to clear the path and continue on their journey. I will say as a caveat that sometimes when you seek another's help in order to move the boulder, you may end up on a slightly different journey than the one you were planning on, that you might need to use some of their coordinates and go towards their destination as well. But that's okay. That's about collaboration and community. Another reason that people have trouble moving the rock off of their spiritual well, it's that, well, there's another midrash. So it looks at the 3 shepherds sitting around the well, and it sees in those shepherds Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. And it tells us this is no ordinary well. This well they would pick up and carry with them on their journey through the wilderness. And it was only when they stopped that the rock would slide off the top of the well, when they camped, when they rested. But when they started moving again, the rock would jump back on top. So this is to say that sometimes we need to take a moment to rest. We need to take a moment to reflect about what are our values truly? How am I living this life? And what is it that I truly want to be doing? By the way, I think Shabbat is a great time to do that. I think it's a great time to make a commitment with someone you love, a friend or a family member, and say, on Shabbat, we're going to check in about our week and see if we've drunk deeply from the well of Torah. Did we do things this week that reflect what we think are important to make the world a better place. So sometimes you need to rest rather than be in constant motion like most of us are with our jobs and our families and our responsibilities to the world. Another reason that it's hard to move the stone from the mouth of the well is we lose our inspiration. Jacob was able to move that rock because he was inspired by Rachel. And it wasn't just her beauty. When he looked at Rachel, he could see the future of the entire Jewish people, because it was with her and his other wives that they birthed a nation of 12. And that nation went down to Egypt and was liberated from Egypt and wandered through the desert and eventually reached the promised land. And when he looked at her, he got that flash of inspiration. He could see the whole of Jewish history unfolding, and he had the power to move the rock. So another thing that can help us is to ask ourselves, what is it that inspires me? Is it the children of the world? Is it my relationship with God? Is it love of a particular community? What will inspire me to move the rock? And the final reason I think we have trouble accessing the water, the inspiration of the Torah, is sometimes it's really overwhelming to live in a world that's so challenged. I was with my mother and my sister, and we were having a conversation about how can you possibly do enough, because at this point, living in our global economy, you buy an article of clothing, it was probably manufactured somewhere in the third world by someone who didn't get paid enough to make it. You eat an apple, and it was probably grown on a tree with pesticides that are destroying the planet. And the conversation was escalating, and my mother loves chocolate. And I said, you know, Mom, a high percentage of the world's chocolate is picked by children who are slaves. It's child labor. And she looked at me and she just said, I am not giving up my chocolate. Now, my mother is a very ethical woman. She has dedicated her entire career to bettering the lives of mothers and infants through obstetrics care. And what she's done is she's picked a corner to concentrate on, and I think that's the way to not get overwhelmed by the world's problems. Choose a few things that you really care about and dedicate yourself to addressing those issues. So we've discussed a few ways about how the rock sits on the well and why it's so hard to move. Sometimes it's because we feel alone. But you're not alone. Ask someone to help you. Sometimes it's because we've lost our inspiration. But there are so many things to inspire you. Just open your eyes. Sometimes it's because we're exhausted. We've gotten so busy with the day-to-day living that we forget. We forget to take a rest and reevaluate, am I living the life I want to be living? And sometimes we simply get overwhelmed by the evil in the world. But don't let it overwhelm you. Pick one or two things and start working on it. The prophet Ezekiel says, I will give you a new heart and a new spirit. I will take your heart of stone and I will replace it with flesh. And I really felt that at the rally yesterday. I feel that I miss the mark so often. I forget to go that extra mile. I'm too tired to care. I feel that heart of stone. And so my sincere prayer for myself in particular this week, but for us as a community, is that we find the strength of Jacob and we remember that there is a deep well of Torah and that we drink from it. Shabbat Shalom.